Good morning and welcome to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners Policy Session on this December 11th, 2024. County Administrator Gary Schmidt, would you please take the roll?
Yes, Chair Smith. Roll call. Commissioner Savas.
Present.
Commissioner Schrader.
Here.
Commissioner West.
Here.
Commissioner Shull.
Here.
Chair Smith.
Here. Gary, what's up?
Thank you. You have 3 policy sessions today, Commissioners. The first is Recovery Center Monthly Update for December 2024. Cindy Becker, Project Manager in County Administration, will lead this session. That means you, Cindy. Come on up, please. And she is the lead on this project, working with Health, Housing, Human Services.
Welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Commissioner Cindy Becker with County Administration. I'm like freezing to death, which is why I have the gloves on. Anyway, I'm really happy to give you the latest progress report on the Recovery Center, and we are making progress, so it's great. So you have before you the little chart that I put together, and so the first thing I wanted to talk about was the property development and construction. We are continuing to work on the zoning requests. That's going to take a little time. We have to have a traffic study done of the area, so it just takes longer. Anyway, you did approve an amendment to the property purchase at your 11/14 meeting. So that's all taken care of. And we're in the process of working out transferring the funds to NCPRD. So that's actively being worked on. The other big news is that we conducted an evaluation of the 2 proposers for the development operation of the center. We had, I think, 9 people on the evaluation committee, including staff, people in recovery, county council. So we had a really much broader group than actually I've ever seen. And so while I cannot, because of purchasing rules and regs, I can't tell you who the apparent successful proposer is. I can tell you that it was unanimous, and we're going to be working with them over the next few weeks, to get a contract ready to bring back to you beginning of January. So we're very excited. We couldn't have gotten this far without your leadership and support, and this is just, it's very, very exciting. And people who have heard about this just think it's great. So we're moving forward, and you're going to have a great project. So any questions about that?
No, I'm just very excited about it. I'm especially excited about the funding sources outlined in the diagram on page 2. That's very good. And we also talked about how it's going to be supported in the future. And I know Commissioner West is in the queue. Do you want to talk about that, or do you want to go first?
I can go first, or
Of course you can.
yeah,
Go ahead.
or if you want to call me, I'm ready.
I was going to ask about the future funding sources.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you asking? Or you want me to
Yeah,
ask?
asking
I'm
who-
sorry.
Cindy, can you talk to me about how we're
Yes.
going to
Thank
keep
you.
this center
Yes,
afloat?
Chair, I would love to.
It's one thing to build it, it's quite another to make sure that we have funding to keep it operational over time. And could you address that?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Commissioner. The construction of it is, as you said, very separate from the operations. And this program will be primarily supported through Medicaid, because the vast majority of people will be Medicaid eligible. And those dollars will then come from the Coordinated Care Organization. They contract for all the mental health and substance use disorder services in the region.
Okay.
So we used to years ago, and that was all changed when CCOs came into being. And the apparent successful provider that we'll be talking with and bringing back to you has worked with them and provides those services today in other parts of the region. So for anyone who's Medicaid eligible, it'll be paid through the CCOs. For anyone who's uninsured, there'll be some number. It'll be a very small number, and there are funds that come through the Behavioral Health Division in H3S that will pay for those. So we are very pleased about the ongoing operations funding support.
Thank you. Do we have, I know we have about $18 million
Correct.
in this scenario. Do we know how much it's going to cost?
We have some estimates. That's part of the negotiations with the provider, because we're going to be looking at the sizing and what they propose and what we're looking for. But my goal is to get to 40 million. And so we're going to be doing a lot of dialing for dollars. We have the money needed to start this project. And so we weren't expecting to have all $40 million right now.
Sure.
If you look at Washington County, how they're doing it, again, it's kind of iterative. So that's what we're pushing towards.
Great, thank you. Commissioner West, you're up.
Yeah, thank you. This is really exciting. We've been working on this for a long time, and thank you for your help, Cindy and Mary and your team and the rest of H3S. We really appreciate it. I also want to just when we talk about funding, thank you to congressional delegation that I believe is at Senator Ron Wyden's office for the $2.5 million. So thank you, Senator Ron Wyden, in your office for helping us get that earmark to help move this forward. Trillium, who is a provider for a CCO, a CCO, right? Yeah, sorry. They're a CCO, and so very, very grateful that they're seeing the value in this. SHS dollars, that's a supportive housing service tax for anybody listening, $8.5 million. Unsure if there could be potential or additional funds from SHS moving forward into the future. Maybe not, but hopeful that possibly there's some more there. We're being a little bit conservative, I think, in our initial estimate of where the funds we do have right now. And then the opioid settlement of $3.5 million is fantastic. And so we're going to continue to do the work with Health Share of Oregon, with the Oregon legislature. I would urge the Oregon legislature and the governor to continue to make investments in infrastructure like this, that's innovative, that's smart, that's holistic in its approach, that meets the need of an entire care continuum, that's focused on helping people recover and build that capital back in their lives that have, for whatever reason, been diminished or is no longer there. And so we want to help people from the ground up rebuild and become a member of the community again, have sobriety, and be as functional in society as they possibly can be and reach their full potential. That's our goal. And this helps us do that. Overall, really great work. I do have a question around zoning. It's not, I'm just kind of, what does that look like traditionally? What's the time frame look like? And what are kind of the steps? You said there's going to be a traffic study, but when we take almost 7 acres and rezone it in a community, what are potentially the barriers that we can foresee? Or what can you speak to that a little further? So
I'm not a zoning queen, which is why we brought in a consultant, because the regulations around zoning are beyond me. It's a very structured, regulated process, and so we're looking at a good 6 months.
Okay.
Before we see anything, got to do the traffic study. And again, we're rezoning, there are 2 different zones in that area, on that piece of property, and we want to have one zone. The challenge we have is the recovery center is, in the zoning world, kind of a mutant, because it does, it's housing and it's services and it's all the different things that we want, and which makes sense for what we're trying to do, but it doesn't kind of fit neatly into the world of zoning.
Okay.
So we're working, hard with Dan's shop to make sure that we're getting them what they need and moving it forward.
How is the Good Neighbor Agreement coming along? That may help us have a more ease of process if we have the partnership within the neighborhood. Can you talk to that?
Thank you. One other thing I wanted to just mention about the zoning, we do have a $10 million ask into Oregon Health Authority. We're, not zoning, excuse me, for funding.
Oh, great.
So we're going to continue working on that.
Nice, very nice.
So thank you for a Good Neighbor group. We had our first meeting. Actually, what we did is we met with each of the individuals who agreed to be on the group ahead of time, just to kind of get their perspective. We actually had more people apply to be on the group than we had room, if you will. We wanted to keep it to a manageable number because we wanted to be able to have a conversation. But we also, it's making this public so anyone can listen in and provide public comment as well. So we had our first meeting, and it was great. I mean, we had a lot of good questions, and there was a lot of engagement, and we told them we would meet again in January, that we were waiting for the provider to come on board, and when that happened, they are going to be a key point in this process, because the Good Neighbor Agreement needs to be between the provider and the community, not the county. And so, but a lot of good questions, nothing that we haven't heard, but really presented in a very respectful, concerned way. And so, we talked about safety, we talked about the neighborhood. It was a much more positive interaction than we've had in the past.
Wow.
Okay. And how's the relationship with WeBuilt?
So thanks for asking that. So we went over there, Rod and Adam and I visited WeBuilt, I'd say like a month ago. very impressed with the property, very impressed with just the whole program. And we met with not only the manager of the program, but some of the parents of the adult children who live there. Very gracious, very welcoming, wanted us to really get to know the program. It was, again, a much different conversation than we had in the public meeting in July. I think the public meeting in July represented more of a, for want of a better phrase, shock to them. And they reacted, but we really had a good conversation and talked a lot about what their concerns and needs were and really what our goals were, and that, you know, the safety and the neighborhood was very important to all of us. And, you know, we wanted to work together with them. So it was a much, I would say, healthier conversation.
Good. And then my last question is when do we, in this phase or process, start to like play with renderings and have an idea about what we're building?
So we will be bringing you a contract for approval in January.
Okay.
And once you do that, and that will also include, we're going to start meeting with the provider, and what we're going to do is we're not going to give them all the money at once. We're really going to chunk it out, and the first part will be the design and renderings. So that will be upfront, and that we would want to get started on that right away. But that would be first order.
And then I have my last, I'll make one more comment. As I look at the funding sources here, you have a lot of different entities bringing in a lot of money to get us to this point. Publicly, we haven't really talked about this, but I think the board should have a conversation about when and where the county can have some skin in the game also financially, if we're to get to the $40 million goal. I don't know what that figure looks like. The board hasn't talked about it. But I do think that the county has the ability to, if this is a landmark project that we're doing, if this is a massive, innovative thing that we're engaging in, that the Board of County Commissioners should have a conversation around the funding that we can also provide from the county's perspective directly. And I will leave it at that, and thank you for your presentation.
Just want to remind the board, the county does have skin in the game in that we bought the property, correct, Gary?
Yes.
Yeah, so we do have considerable skin in the game. I don't need to remind the group, but I will, of the budget realities facing us, and we really do need dedicated funding to make this go. Thank you very much, Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. I'm on board. I don't want my questions and comments that are about to follow to somehow interfere with that. I just want to make it perfectly clear. I'm supportive of this project. I want to see it happen. I think it's be a shining example of maybe, hopefully, treating the population in a way that has a much higher success rate than what's presently out there today, and something somewhat unique, as I understand it. So that said, you know, I know sometimes it's easier to build things. Still a lot of money. It's easier to build things than it is to operate them. So I'm going to get back to the future operations and kind of go back a little bit to yesterday's discussion in a way of my concerns that knowing this is a nonprofit potentially, or a partnership involving nonprofits, government, maybe the private sector healthcare in the operations aspect, but do we have a thumbnail sketch or a vision of how is that going to be a weaving of funds to operate this facility in place? How's that going to happen? What does that look like?
Providers will do what they do now, which is they will bill Medicaid. And so there's rates for all the different types of services.
Okay.
And so they will bill directly to the CCO.
Okay, great. So there's not necessarily reliance upon supportive housing services dollars beyond for operations on the
Correct.
operations side of it.
Correct.
Okay. And I do know that part of the population won't be eligible for SHS because it'll be more, some people that have addictions aren't homeless, right? So there's that aspect. So knowing what little I do know is that there'll still be opportunity beyond this proposal for other opportunities on the site that aren't going to be utilized, you know, the remaining property. And I think to Ben's question, maybe that's where the county, possibly from a housing standpoint, may or may not have opportunity to be more involved, whether it's, you know, using some of that land for additional housing whether it's workforce or whether it is recovery or whether it is the houseless population trying to get back on their feet. So I see opportunity in the horizon for the county to be more involved. But I'm glad to hear we're not going to rely on supportive housing services dollars to operate this.
Absolutely.
And just a comment in terms of the actual land available. We've already gotten lots of questions about what about this population, what about that population, and what we've said is yes, 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 but we want to start out with a strong foundation. We want to focus on the adult population. That's not to say that we won't over time look at families, look at probably youth, but we're not going to do that at the beginning. So there will be opportunity in terms of the land being used for this first phase. It won't anywhere near cover the 6 acres, so we hope to bring in other populations.
Great. Well, thanks for your work, Cindy.
Thank you. Commissioner Scholl.
Yeah, good morning, Cindy. I have some questions about the interaction between the provider and the Board of Commissioners come next year. You mentioned in January the provider would present a scope of work. Is that correct, to the Board of Commissioners?
No, Commissioners, I'm sorry, Commissioner Scholl. We would do like we're doing with an RFP or any contract. After there's an apparent successful proposer, we then meet with them to negotiate the terms, and, we'll look at what they propose and any kind of modifications we want to make to that, and that will all be included in the final contract that will come to you. So they won't be making a presentation to you.
Okay, so the provider will present the Board of Commissioners with essentially a preliminary design concept for the project.
Commissioner, they won't have a design. We're just talking, the contract will talk about the capacity and numbers, but not actual design of the buildings.
Yeah, okay, just overall like a bubble diagram of what it's going to consist of, correct? What the capacity is going to be, general concepts for the project.
Yes.
Without any kind of actual architectural design. Okay, so once this process proceeds, what will the relationship between the Board of Commissioners be and the provider when it comes to decision-making on the actual preliminary designs from the architect?
Commissioner, the relationship would be primarily with staff, to be honest, and we would be working with them in terms of the designs. It's kind of like some of the other buildings that you've been involved with when we were doing the new behavioral health building. We didn't bring the designs back to the board. They worked with staff on that development. So that would be part of our updates, but at this point, we weren't going to be bringing them back to the board for approval.
Okay, so my concern is that the idea, the concept for the recovery center came from the board. Commissioner West being instrumental in driving this. So my concern is that at some point in the future, the conceptual origination for this concept, for this project, would be potentially subordinated to the provider in decision-making outside of the Board of Commissioners. So we want to make sure that the project is going to meet the intent from the Board of Commissioners, and that it's going to be scaled to a size and scope that's efficient, meets the need of the county, and is sustainable. So I just hope that the Board of Commissioners will have their finger on this decision-making, and that the train won't run away from the very people who initiated the
Absolutely.
concept.
And, we've been doing monthly updates with the board,
Okay.
and we'll be bringing all the information. I think it becomes a question of if there are some pieces that you want to approve first, then you need to let us know that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Gary, you're up.
So I'm sorry, yes, Commissioners, you will approve the architectural design, you will approve the service, the agreement that the service provider will provide, you will approve all of that. That's not a staff. They will delegate that to staff after they make those decisions.
What he
You'll be
said.
involved.
Okay, Commissioner Savas, and then we need to move this along, Commissioners. This is just an update. We're not going to plan the entire world on this recovery center and during this policy session today. Thank you, Commissioner Savas.
Maybe another way of coming at, I think that Commissioner Scholl's question spawned a thought, and that is, after this is all approved and so forth, in the coming months, years, being that we have skin in the game, obviously, what we will have influence and leverage on what's occurring there. And if so,
Absolutely.
what does that look like?
So again, what we will bring back to the board at the various stages, we'll be showing you the schedule and what's going to be done, at various times, bring that back to the board, and you'll be looking at that. The services are the services that we've started, that we talked about at the very beginning, and so we're not, changing those. The question might be when those are phased in, because not everything's going to be there on day one. So it's really, we want to continue to have an active dialogue with you, and then at various points of the development phase, we'll be bringing that to you. If you want to have a presentation by the provider, obviously we'll make that happen. So we want to make sure that we're continuing to go down the same path together.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, thank you for your input. Cindy and staff, Mary, thank you for your work on this project. It's a fantastic project. I so look forward to its completion.
Thank
And that's
you.
just an update. Today, we're not voting on anything. Okay, Gary, what's next?
Yep.
Thank you. Next policy session is Business Development Grant Award Recommendations. Staff from Transportation and Development will present. Dan Johnson, Director of Transportation and Development. Laura Edmonds, the Economic Development Manager. This is bringing back to you what you've discussed and approved earlier this year. Go ahead, please, Dan and Laura.
Welcome and introduce yourselves.
Good morning, Dan Johnson, the Director of the Department of Transportation and Development. I am joined by Laura Edmonds, the Manager for our Office of Economic Development. We are here to share some information with you. Essentially, the Board of County Commissioners back in April of this year requested that our Office of Economic Development go out and develop a grant program to invest our lottery dollars more directly in some of the businesses in and around the community. We are here to present to you, number one, kind of the process that we went through, including notifications of funding opportunities, et cetera, review that was completed, and our recommendation for those grants going forward. If you recall, the board authorized up to $600,000 of lottery funds to be directed to this effort. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura to kind of do a more detailed summary of the process and the recommendation.
Good morning. Thanks for having us here. We're excited about the program and the conversation that will ensue today. So basically, through a very public application process, we promoted the grant opportunity throughout the region. And when we did that, we developed a very thorough notice of funding opportunity. That was our own county public government affairs group help us to orchestrate that as is required. And then we ended up pushing this grant through social media, the chambers of commerce, our business partners, the cities, press releases. So we got a very broad distribution from this. Our own IT department also helped us to build a very friendly and easy application that was online, web-based. And then with that, also we provided FAQs, responded directly to emails, phone calls from different applicants. So we were able to make sure that we were providing current and updated data and answering questions as we proceeded through the whole process. So through that, the Office of Economic Development received 34 total applications. 17 applications met the determined eligibility criteria, and these 17 applications had a total funding request of over $1 million. That's attachment B in your packet. So the eligibility criteria was defined during that April 17th meeting with you. It was for traded sector, the business had to be located or be relocating to Clackamas County. Project types were either capital purchase or workforce development opportunities. Matching requirements was 100% or more match. And they had to have an active registration with Secretary of State, and they had to be an established business for 2 or more years in business. And they also, another requirement that you mentioned was significant to you was that they must remain in the county for 2 years after the funding. So staff from the Office of Economic Development, Mount Hood Territory, Oregon's Mount Hood Territory and Water Environment Services was the makeup of our committee, and that committee is listed in your roster on Attachment D. So these recommendations to you are put forward by that committee after a very thorough vetting process. And that process was, they were able to receive the applications, read through them, understand the projects, the project scopes from the businesses. They identified both a full and a partial funding opportunity so they could tell us what their budgets and that alignment looked like. So they had the opportunity to ask for both for full or partial. And so based on the 600,000, the committee then established the funding amounts for those businesses, as you see in some of these reports. So of the 17 applications that met the eligibility criteria, the Review and Recommendation Committee is recommending 11 recipients, and those are spread out through Attachment A for you, pages 1 through 14. I know it's a lot, but we tried to keep it succinct and very, just the important details, so it makes it a little bit more user-friendly for you. So with the board approval, if we're looking for board approval today. But of the 11, I want to give you this highlight. Of the 11 applicants, we're recommending 10 recipients currently operate within Clackamas County, 2 of which will be relocating their manufacturing process into the county that's currently elsewhere, Portland and Washington County, I believe. And then one of those awardees is looking to fully relocate their business as they're going through their process. So that's great. So based on the $600,000 approved, the funding allocation recommendations were determined to maximize the economic return on investment for our lottery dollars. These recipients were selected due to the fact that they built a very strong case for funding of their projects and they had a clear and economic impact to the county. Of the 17, these 11 ranked the highest for their project's ability to invest in capital and capacity improvements and to expand workforce opportunities. The projects also provide, when completed, will also support competitive advantages to broaden their outreach regionally, nationally, and internationally in their markets. So that's some of the review committee's considerations when they did this. So upon board approval, staff will then initiate development of funding agreements with each grant recipient and advance funding agreements to the board for approval. We aim to have those fully awarded, if approved, by April of 2025.
I want to highlight just briefly those funding agreements to make sure we're clear. This is a recommendation before the board for consideration. Those funding agreements will be clear. They will have performance metrics associated with them and standards associated with them. So this is not simply a give, it's basically a give, and there's an assurance that we're going to get what was promised as a part of the application. So we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. That kind of ends our presentation. There's some options for consideration there for the board, but we're here at your disposal to answer any questions.
Commissioner Scholl.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for that information. I noticed that on a couple of these, that under anticipated impact, there's a comment regarding creating additional jobs, but some of them don't reflect any thing under anticipated impact regarding additional jobs. Can we, or is it true that this investment is going to stimulate these businesses to produce more jobs in Clackamas County? And if so, do we have any idea how many jobs that would be?
It's a great question. The purpose of this is to stimulate growth in the business to then provide additional hiring opportunities. And so with the reporting that each business is required to do for us, they're going to report back hiring, wage data. So if it's workforce development, and then hopefully improvement in their revenues. So we will be collecting some of that financial data and wage data as we go. So there'll be progress reports that are requested of them, and then there'll be annual reports that are requested. And so what we're looking to do is ask for 2 separate annual reports so that we get a 1-year and a 2-year, so that we can actually determine the impact on the return on our investment.
Okay, thank you.
I'm reading through these applications, or excuse me, we're past the application process. The description of what they hope to accomplish in Clackamas County. And the huge irony in the one group that's getting $26,000. With that, they hope to expand their employment base by 4 people. Obviously, they're not using all the $26,000, thinking they're going to get 4 people, but they have that in their business plan to do. And this is very exciting. I'm so happy that these folks are interested in staying in Clackamas County or moving to Clackamas County out of others' jurisdictions. And I think that you have just done great work on attracting this type of, all types of businesses to Clackamas County. Yeah, it's a good fit. It's a very good fit. Any other questions before we go ahead? Commissioner Schrader.
I have one more question, thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Schrader,
Oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Okay. Oh, do you want to go? It's okay if Mark goes, and I'll just go.
Okay,
after
just
him.
one more quick question. On the businesses that are going to receive a grant, are these repeat businesses that have received grants before in this process, or are they all new?
This is all new. We have never,
Oh,
we have not
okay.
funded this in the past.
All right, good.
It's a new program that you authorize the development of and authorize the distribution of these funds.
Commissioner Schrader.
Okay. I want to thank you for this. This is exactly what we should be doing. My question is, we had, during the COVID and the other issues we were dealing with, we had those, that coalition of chambers. Have they been involved with this, and is there a way to get them involved with this? Were they aware that this, I guess I want to know, were they aware that this was going on, and how did we integrate any of their input into any of this?
So we ended up using the business survey that we ourselves
Okay.
did to be able to garner information on what the businesses needed and where they needed support. And so, but the chambers we encouraged the chambers to, and we did outreach to help share
Okay,
the grant
okay.
opportunities with their business community. And most did, so.
Most did?
did,
Yeah. Are they still meeting, Laura, on a regular basis as a group?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I-
I'm going to try and connect with Wilsonville to see if that happens, because I also think that, particularly like in some of those smaller chambers, like in Estacada and Sandy, Estacada is growing, and I think Estacada did get something here, didn't they? I don't,
Yeah.
one of the rural communities
Yeah, one of
did.
the businesses.
Yeah, because I just want to make sure that they're aware of it. I know that we weren't able to continue to fund them as a coalition because, the ARPA monies or CARE dollars, whichever pot that was at this point, isn't there, but I'd like to make sure that that coalition between the larger and the smaller ones are still working together. I'd like to, make a chance to visit them and then make sure that they're aware that we're working on their behalf to help their communities and help them succeed to the best of their ability.
And that's a great kind of segue. I mean, this is the first of a number of years of this program. So if you want to continue to spread the word, any of you want to spread the word about the viability and future grant requests,
Okay.
the intent is not to make this a one and go. I mean, the thought is we'll probably might, in future years, be doing a similar grant opportunity. It's also interesting, if you look at attachment A, just by sheer coincidence, it's great to know that they're urban and rural.
Yep.
They're spread out through the county. Obviously, that's important that we have respect the businesses wherever they may lay, urban or in our rural communities, and that just happened to happen with this, and they're the greatest return on investment. So,
Great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for your work. I'm sorry I couldn't join you yesterday. At least I can walk today. So,
All right. We have an option to consider for a motion on page 2. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, okay. I move to approve the grant recommendations as listed in Attachment A and direct staff to create funding agreements for the final board approval.
second.
Commissioner Scholl has moved we approve grant recommendations as listed in attachment A and direct staff to create funding agreements for final board approval, in the Business Development Grant Awards recommendation. Commissioner Schrader has seconded the motion. Any further discussions? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll? Oh,
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl.
Aye.
Madam Chair.
aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Commissioners, for your support of this. Thank you, staff, for your very good work on this. I'm very excited about this for the future. Gary, what's up?
The next policy session is Development Ready Land Study, Part 2. Transportation and Development staff will present. Dan Johnson, Director of Transportation and Development, and Jamie Stasny, Transportation and Land Use Policy Manager. Go ahead.
Well, hello again. Nice to see all of you. I'm going to take a little bit of time to introduce this topic, just to make sure we're clear about a couple different things. I'm going to kind of start with kind of how did we get here. There's a common notion in Clackamas County that we need more land to attract businesses and to build on a brighter economic future. The question is how much, and the question is where, and to better understand our areas and the businesses that we have and the sectors that we have. And what are their land needs? These are all just questions that kind of feed into that discussion. I want to make sure that we're clear. The cities are a key partner in this discussion. And essentially, the cities are required to undertake an economic opportunities analysis to analyze and forecast growth in their industrial and other business districts, and then designate an adequate 20-year land supply. They're key in that. They drive a lot of that work and partner with us, but they take the lead in developing those plans. Counties are not required to do that. Essentially, what happens is that these Washington, Multnomah, and Clackamas County fall under Metro's purview, okay? And essentially, Metro does more of a regional analysis that doesn't always align with kind of our individual jurisdictional needs. And you've asserted a couple comments about that. Let's just kind of harken back a little bit. Essentially, August 14th, you provided a letter that says we have concerns with Metro's methodology that asserts that we have a surplus of industrial lands. They assumed and stated nearly 6,000 acres were available inside the UGB to serve the regional needs for the next 20 years. And we took some exception and added some clarity and some concern and made comments to Metro. You made those comments to Metro on the county's behalf. And essentially that and this fundamental need and knowledge of the issues that we're facing directed and empowered this board to direct staff to kind of go away and do a deeper dive into this topic. And we are here to kind of follow up on that deeper dive. Essentially, we are here to talk to you about what we're calling kind of this development-ready land strategy, okay? And there's two parts to it. One is the industrial site readiness study, and the second is the development-ready land study, okay? And they're two separate but related elements that we're going to talk about here briefly. So let's talk about the industrial site readiness study. Basically, this study is intended to provide clarity on the specific land, site, and infrastructure characteristics needed by industry clusters and sectors identified by the economic landscape analysis that we presented to the board on November 12th, 2024. If you recall that, Laura Edmonds and I were here. We kind of shared with you the results of that study and that analysis. And essentially, this is kind of a next step, taking that information and kind of refining it a little bit further to get a deeper dive into those sectors that we have or those sectors we may want to grow. The results of this study are going to do a couple different things. One, define target subclusters and emerging industries in Clackamas County. Identify cluster impacts, market feasibility analysis, market analysis, and fiscal impacts of some of these clusters and benefits they may have to the county. Assess current and forecasted employment land needs by the type or cluster that we have. And essentially do a deeper dive into the analysis, because that study was essentially who is Clackamas County, where are we succeeding, where are we growing, where are we retreating, and this study will basically refine that. It's like these are areas and sectors that we may want to retain and or grow, and what do we need to do that? Do we need certain types of lands? What kind of lands do we need? What kinds of infrastructure do we need for some of these businesses? Are they different depending on the sector, et cetera? Essentially, we'd be looking to fund that study through lottery funds, through our Office of Economic Development. We're estimating the cost of that study about $200,000. If the study was approved by the Board of County Commissioners, we'd look to get underway here in 2025 and estimating a final report by 2026 approximately, okay? So the second portion of this strategy is around the land study, development-ready land study. Before we go too far in describing this study, I want to make sure we highlight a couple of things. One, Title 11 states that the counties are responsible for land use planning for urban reserve areas, and cities likely to provide governance or an urban services for that area shall, in conjunction with Metro and appropriate service districts, develop a concept plan for the urban reserves prior to the addition to the UGB. That kind of highlights our roles. So I want to make sure we are crystal clear. We are not talking about developing concept plans for these areas. We are not doing that. This is basically an informational exercise to better understand those areas that are in the UGB that are currently zoned rural. That's mostly kind of our Damascus area, okay? And the urban reserve areas. It's to do a deeper dive. If you think about some of the history around some of these areas, Metro applied kind of a two-dimensional thought process to a three-dimensional problem in regards to cost of infrastructure, developable land areas, natural buffers and areas, and impacts to those elements as well. So it's doing a deeper dive into those areas. Some of this high-level analysis was done as a part of the reserves process in 2009, and we're going to honor that, and kind of that's going to be the building block for some of the data and research we're going to do. But essentially, we'd be looking to kind of refine that and expand on that and then provide this information not only to ourselves, to our regional partners. And you talk about partnerships. This is a partnership with all those cities that are impacted or have properties that we've described that are either rural, zoned rural within the UGB, or are near urban reserves. Those primarily consist of the city of Happy Valley. You know, they've been very active out in the east portion of the county with some of their comprehensive plan adoption for that East Happy Valley and Carver areas. You've got Oregon City, Westland, Wilsonville, Lake Oswego, and Tualatin. Our technical staff has been meeting with their technical staff to try to build some consensus, and we generally believe we do have consensus on the scope that we're proposing to move forward. I do have to highlight there were some concerns raised by Lake Oswego specifically about concerns around, if you recall, there's a 3-party and a 5-party agreement specific to that Stafford area that really clarifies the roles and responsibilities. And there's no intent with this work to violate the commitment that was made in those agreements. Essentially, as we say, it's an information gathering exercise. So outcomes of this particular strategy or study, basically we're looking to provide some alignment and partnerships with our cities and impacted service providers, an understanding of available and usable lands to support future housing and job growth, what public and private partnerships are there to support the development. This does not always have to be just a public discussion. There's private partners that are out there. Information that will inform regional and state land use advocacy approaches. This information will help us have a deeper dive and a better understanding of who we are and what we have and what we don't have, and allow us to be more refined in our approach in regional dialogues and advocacy. And then last but not least, better understanding of the real cost of infrastructure investments needed to make land shovel ready. This effort is, like I said, is an information gathering exercise. I want to make sure we don't have any money currently funded for this. Our intent and our request today from the board is to get authorization to look for funding through the 2040 CET grant process through Metro. We'd be looking for a grant of up to around $1 million to complete this, because this is broad in all these different areas of the county. Essentially, if it's funded in the next cycle, this study would begin we're estimating April of 2025 and be completed by the end of 2026, approximately. So again, these are two separate independent elements, but they relate very closely together. One, again, is educating us about the businesses we have and what they need. Second is what lands are out there, and how do we gain more information about how we make them viable and serviceable, or how are they not viable and serviceable, in all honesty? There may be some information that may shed light on the fact that some of these areas have less development potential than they possibly may have been planned for. So with that, I know it's kind of a lot, and we usually don't spend that amount of time kind of doing a deeper dive on some of this, but I'm here, Jamie's here to answer any questions you might have. There's some options there for consideration, but we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jamie. Quit talking so much. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think Dan summed it up well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both for your work on this. Commissioner Scholl, you're up.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for that information. This is profoundly important to the future economy of the county, and so I'm excited that this is going to happen. I have a couple questions, though, on both the industrial site readiness study and the development-ready land study. Will we see, as a result of these studies, a category of readiness of industrial lands? Is that how it's going to be presented? And will we see an overlay for each study for utilities, sewer, water, electrical, and how that, either the existence of those utilities or the need for them to be created to bring viability to these industrial lands? Are we going to see that in these studies? And will it have some sort of associated timeline for those things and a cost? For example, both these studies, I would assume, would have identified different industrial sites in terms of their time frame to be developed, to be shovel-ready. In other words, am I clear on this? I'm just wondering how all the pieces of this would be put together, because without a clear understanding of the relationship between utilities, sewer, water, et cetera, and the land, the study really wouldn't make too much sense to me.
I'll start, and if you want to add on to it, please feel free to do. Essentially, so I'm going to just highlight the fact that this is the information that we're trying to gain, and it's not site-specific, so it really doesn't have a tiered or a hierarchy to those particular sites. But what it does is it identifies the opportunities and the challenges for certain areas. Okay, and so within these areas, it will identify, existing utility infrastructure at a high level. I mean, this is not a micro analysis; it's a macro analysis.
Okay.
And so essentially, it'd be looking at current utilities provided, utility deficiencies.
Okay.
It may, the land study may leverage the readiness study and look at like sectors. And so, for example, if one of our sectors has a higher need for power, I mean, that would then be considered. If this is something we want to support, then we got to have our minds more around the power supply and things like that. So that might go into a cost increase for certain areas, whatever it might be. But it's not. Again, I want to make sure it's not a site by site analysis. It is an information study around the areas. So.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
I would add the industrial land piece will be more detailed because it is looking at lands inside the existing urban growth boundary and looking at the site criteria to meet the target sectors. So that one will be a little more detailed and zoomed in. The other study will be at a higher level, so it will not be site-specific, but I think there'll be a little more detail in that first step inside the urban growth boundary.
Thank you. Any other commissioners' comments or questions? Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, appreciate the work on this. Just knowing where things are naturally occurring, I use that word naturally, with some qualifications, but if we look where the growth is really happening right now, and I think where there's infrastructure challenges as well, and de facto moratoriums, one area, Jamie, you know this really well, is Sunrise Corridor. Happy Valley is growing immensely. And not only is there needs for infrastructure, but there's also needs for services. And one of those, for example, is transit, right? That's not as much infrastructure, it is really a service. So I'm just kind of wondering, when I came here 14 years ago, we had the CAP site, that was our big chunk of land we had, and that was it, pretty much. That was of any size. I forgot what the acreage was.
70.
Yeah, yeah. And today, you drive by there, it's all fully developed, and I guess that's, kudos to all of us. We certainly learned from that there's a need out there, and there's a market out there, and we get a piece of land of that size, and it'll get gobbled up. And I'm looking at what's in the UGB today, and a lot of that land, as we did our gateway study, Sunrise Gateway, looking at the available lands out over there and opportunities. So all I want to say is that I hope we can get some traction on that in regards to having regional acceptance, I'll say political acceptance. And I think sometimes the politics of this region, being the smaller of the three counties, does not lend itself, or it doesn't seem to lend itself to where we're in, find ourselves in favor of trying to exercise some of those opportunities. In fact, the taking of that last, acreage out of the UGB was, a very painful thing. So my question, whoever wishes to answer it, is that when we talk about the infrastructure, and I know that cities have typically take the stance that they're the ultimate providers of services and so on. In Clackamas County, even in this region to some degree, not so much in transit. So, and I'm talking practical shuttles and buses for, that. And certainly that's an issue. But I just wonder, my question really being is that, is that going to be factored in as well? Are services going to be factored in that are slightly rely upon infrastructure as well? Kind of a question out there, or is that something that there's regional opportunity or county opportunity to be more regional in providing that kind of a service? Loaded question.
I can take it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think the place we're at right now is looking really at infrastructure, which of course you need a road to put a bus on. So we'll be thinking about some of those things, but I think that's a little further down the line. And I do think there's an opportunity for us to gather more information that could inform future policy conversations about service provision, especially transit.
Yeah, and the reason I ask, because I know it's this quasi-infrastructure, but the reason I ask is that what we hear from our transit provider, the prevailing large transit provider in this region, is we're not going to provide you any transit unless it's high density. And then when that high density is being built in sections of Happy Valley, there's still no transit. So, sometimes it's, we got to walk their walk, but they're not walking they're not living up to their end of the bargain. And so I want to make sure that somehow they're involved, right? And that we're not building, and the cities are upset about this too. They're upset because the state mandates for housing and high density and all this stuff is putting a lot of pressure on, not coming up with the money for infrastructure, not coming up with basic things like transit, not providing, which is a service quasi-infrastructure thing. But that's where the shortfall really is. So I'm hoping that this is all for naught, and somehow we get some recognition from the state and all the other providers, or interested parties that we're serious about this, and they should notice the fact that we're, again, naturally growing with some of the largest, fastest growing cities, or not the largest, but the fastest growing cities in the state are here in Clackamas County. Not all of them, but a majority of them.
A majority, you're right.
So, lots said there, but I just hope, again,
Very
politics.
thorough statement. Was great.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Schrader.
Hey, thanks for all this work. I know we've done this in many iterations before, and we've needed to do it again. And I'm glad that we're focusing within the region. We are going to have to, for good or for ill, work with a regional government. However, the regional government does not consider our outlying cities, Canby, Estacada, Molalla, that have actually buildable lands and parks, that are actually have the land for traded sector. So my suggestion is to also look at those areas. They want to grow, they need to grow, they want to have a tax base. They're kind of our smaller satellite cities. So the big issue is actually see how we can get them the infrastructure they need. For example, Estacada, for instance, if they had natural gas, they would all really have an additional opportunity to expand. And since it has been on the record and said to me that the region stops at the urban growth boundary, which I think is a rather ridiculous statement since these areas are often our food shed, it would give us some more opportunities for business expansion in those communities. I know Canby has an industrial park, Estacada has an industrial park, Sandy has an industrial park. And I think that those are high-growth areas that would be open maybe to larger expansions of land for certain industries. So I would strongly not only work within the urban growth boundary, with those regional folks who think the rest of our county doesn't count, but I'm hopeful that we, because we are basically representing the entire county, that we'll look at that. And the other piece of this is my suggestion to those smaller cities, when you talk about transit, I think they need to do what Wilsonville did. I think they need to do what Canby did. Canby's an example of that, of developing their own transit. I don't think that TriMet's going to be there for us or to help with any density. And I think that any help we can give them, of even having them talk to the cities that have done this, would be fruitful, because then that's another piece that could give them the infrastructure they need without relying on an area that discounts 50% of our county. Anyway, thank you.
Just a caveat, Malala has developed their own transit, just like those other two.
Okay, good, thank you.
So there's more, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
don't even, we don't need, just let's have the local people.
Right.
Let's work with them, and there are USDA dollars for these communities. It isn't just Department of Commerce dollars.
Sure.
But I would really look at those kinds of issues too, to see if we can get some of the USDA dollars for rural development there. And let's not forget our ag industry. That is a huge industry in this state and those communities as well.
Those are great comments. And we're working on that. It's separate from this effort, but it is inclusive of the great work that has been going off into our Office of Economic Development.
Right.
They've been coordinating very closely with those rural communities. We are tied into the discussions, especially around some of those City of Candy, Estacada, Sandy,
Yep.
et cetera, Malala. I mean, we are engaging in those dialogues and those discussions.
Well, we have an opportunity to help them out with business development and growth and prosperity, and not be tainted by some of the urban issues that have not been managed appropriately in the region. And I say that with great sadness, but that's how I see it. Anyway.
Yeah. Thank you. Commissioner West.
Mr. Johnson, Ms. Stansny, thank you for your presentation. Really appreciate it. I know that Metro is providing a grant to help pay for this. It's around $1 million. The issue around the industrial lands and having this information, it's not new, right? Commissioner's office has talked about his long tenure as a commissioner and how these conversations have been ongoing. I trust the gathering and the data and the work that you're going to do at a local level, understanding the needs of Clackamas County much more than I would trust Metro if they were to do it directly. I think that you guys are going to look at it through a lens that's going to benefit the community the most here, and where our needs are and how to assess that. I'm trying to, if we get this data and this information, I'm trying to assess or understand how powerful is that? How does this help us move the needle to get some of this stuff built or get the land availability that we need? Is this just an expensive study that's going to fall on deaf ears because Metro's not interested in really taking care of the needs of Clackamas County? Maybe they are towards the county to the north or other areas that have more representation than maybe Clackamas has politically, which is just kind of a long-term reality. Commissioner Schrader just kind of spoke to that a little bit around the political realities that we faced for many, many years in Clackamas. So I'm trying to just strategically understand the benefit that we're going to see from this. Is just going to be another government study that goes on the large shelf of other dusty studies that were done once upon a time? And how is this an effective tool for us moving forward?
Do it. Okay.
You want to start?
I'll start. We don't like to do dusty studies that go on shelves and are not
It's been
useful.
known to happen. Not
It is
maybe
known
with
to
you,
happen.
but
I
it's
can
been
name a
known to
couple,
happen.
but I don't like to, yeah. You ask a similar question. We talked about advancing the development-ready land study, and my response was the fact that information's power. And I think that we have varying cities of various complexities that have various finances and availability of funds to do a deeper dive into some of these areas. And I think if we want to play a role in kind of helping them better understand these areas and the opportunities they present and maybe the challenges they present, this is a way to be a catalyst in that discussion, just to better understand the area. And I say that in the context of the fact there are so many things hitting the jurisdictions right now. And I didn't go into that part of the presentation, but if you think about the fact that we've got the resident Oregon housing needs analysis is rolling through, these mandates from the state on the housing requirements, we've got all these pressures on our current boundaries. And I think that the ability to provide information to our partners that are out there in the region to help them better understand their perimeter areas as well as their internal, because that's the discussion that's going to have to occur. I mean, if you think about some of these cities, some are just bound. I think about poor cities like Gladstone. I mean, they're just bound. They don't have any option. They just have to go up. But some other cities may choose to kind of keep the livability of their community and choose to expand their boundaries a little bit. That's a difficult decision if you don't have information to kind of vet the pros and cons of that versus going vertical in your community and changing livability in your community. And so I say that just in light of the fact that that information isn't just information that's provided, but it's information in a time of when key decisions are being made. Mm-hmm. And I think that the more that we can help partner and educate our communities, the more they are then able to look at that data and make decisions about how their communities develop in the future. So I don't know.
Can I jump in on this? I trust you. I trust both of you in this because, and tell me if there's some parallel here in strategy or thought. It wasn't that long ago that the two of you helped galvanize 16 cities that often don't work well together and a Board of County Commissioners to get the data and the information necessary in a way that probably very few local governments could have done to fight ODOT on tolling, on the EA process and NEPA and all of those things that we were doing and how to understand. And our 40-page document that was the data necessary that legislators needed so that they could galvanize along with the local governments to really cause the pause now twice from the governor. That's a totally different kind of political animal and local fight. Is this type of study parallel or similar to potentially trying to work on land use issues in Clackamas County with this type of information? Could it be used? And if so, because government moves so slow, how long is a study like this, the information and the data received from it, considered relevant?
I'll try and take a crack at that.
Shelf life?
Shelf
Yeah.
life. Yeah, shelf life. Back to the shelf.
So I would say the effort that you referenced was a lot about building partnerships and trust, having one conversation, sharing information, sharing technical resources. In that way, I think this could be a similar exercise. We are a part of a regional conversation regarding land use. And as Dan started this session, there's a lot of questions and assumptions floating around about how much land we do or do not have, how usable it is or isn't. And this type of a study could provide us the information we need to understand what lands we need, whether we have those inside the existing urban growth boundary or not, and what lands exist in the areas that have been designated for growth over the next 50 years. That information could be powerful to inform future conversations and information that can support our cities in thinking about all of these obstacles they're facing as those different pieces come come to them, and they're forced to make some of the hard decisions. So in that way, I would say yes.
And my last comment is I want to thank Chair Smith for bringing this forward, this kind of piggybacking on like the successes we've probably had around tolling, around how to continue to advocate for land use in Clackamas County. This was your idea, so thank you for that. I wanted to make sure that that was acknowledged because I think it's doing this type of legwork and groundwork can be beneficial to us. I support this, of course, but I wanted to ask those questions and have that conversation. So thank you for your leadership on this, Chair, and the work that you guys are about to endeavor on. I'm pretty sure it's going to pass, so thank you.
Oh,
Nope. Go ahead. I just want to make a note. I appreciate the comments about the support about the tolling. It was more than Jamie and I. Regional partners are out there, our city partners that were out there. It was a regional effort, so just want to say that. Thank you.
I don't understand why it's going to take until 2026 to have this land study done. There's been 2 comments about shelf life, when as a matter of fact, as you know, there are very capable engineering groups and land use groups in Clackamas County that has much of this data already available to them, and the only thing you have to do is make a phone call to a couple of them. And the data hasn't changed because our land use laws hasn't changed. The infrastructure hasn't changed. Nothing has changed in 20 years, hence the land use study. If you're telling me that this is going to take an entire year to do this land use study, we might as well write off the next 4 years, because we will be in the same position 4 years from now as we are today with nothing. We've already missed the legislative session for 2026. By the way, there is a bill drop for land use to make more land for Clackamas County in housing and jobs lands. While I appreciate this, you can understand my frustration. Since I became a commissioner in 2013, we are no closer. Today, it's just the same old fights. I get emails, Mark gets emails, we all get emails. Oh, don't do this, don't do this. But yet we're lacking. The population in Clackamas County has increased by 25% since I became chair. That means the needs are more, our infrastructure is more, everything is more. The ability to grow and feed ourselves, food is more. And I cited yesterday a statistic regarding agriculture, and Clackamas County is the leader of all counties in America for the production of Christmas trees. And for generations, we were Christmas tree farmers. I shouldn't say generations, decades. And we went out of that because my husband and I had conversations. He says, you know, honey, Christmas trees are fine, but they're very labor intensive, and I don't see a good labor market being able to help you in your retirement years lift 200-pound Christmas trees onto a truck, because that's the way we still do it. And you can't eat Christmas trees, so let's grow a crop that we can eat and feed the world with very good protein, and that's hazelnuts. I'm deviating here a little bit, but this is my huge frustration about this. Yes, you're doing good work. I see no urgency to get an answer and tackle the land use situation in the state of Oregon, the grand bargain that Washington County got that we didn't get, not only the urban reserves, but the rural reserves who've tied up Clackamas County and locked us in a jail while Metro flits around and does their stuff and refuses to answer us. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, and you can't wait for me to exit out the door, because I won't be here holding your feet to the fire. Because the rest of the board is going to sit here and say, God, this is wonderful. But yet, they don't know what's happening behind the scenes. Get this study done. Don't take a year to do it, and bring it back to this board and get some resolution. There's no way, Dan, that you should be spending a year on a land use study when most of the information is out there. Yes, I'm appreciative, but you can understand. You and I have had this discussion since I was sworn in practically as chair 4 years ago. Let's make more land in Clackamas County. What are we doing? What are we doing? So this is the last I'll get to say on this topic. I am grateful. It doesn't sound like it, but I'm wholly frustrated. When I was sworn into the Oregon legislature in 2001, I was sponsoring and passing bills on land use that the Democrat governor signed. And I got the name My nickname in the legislature was the land use queen. And there's still people who are alive still refer to me to that because of my understanding of what farming does. On the restrictions that put upon farmers, they couldn't even get a mortgage. And I changed some of those laws. The fact that you have to gross $80,000 a year in Oregon to be able to site a new farm is gross. Nobody does that. So what do? You submit your forms to Clackamas County, and it causes people to, shall I say, fudge what's going to happen for the future, just so they can farm and maybe make $50,000. So all of this is real, but until we go to the legislature and we have Metro coming and helping and aiding us, I fear that we're not going to get any better. And the work that has been done on the Economic Development Office with siting businesses is great. Let's just keep doing it. But these are real situations that and people are leaving. They're leaving the state because of our economic development and land use. I want to thank you for that. Go ahead, Concord Commissioners. We have a motion to consider on page 4. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, I just want to say, from my perspective, there has actually been a lot of change, and a lot of things have changed, and I'm not saying for the better. Am I frustrated because of a number of things? Absolutely. I have a long list. However, I just want to point out some of the dynamics that have changed, and I mentioned politics earlier, so politics is really about people. There's very few elected officials that were here 10 years ago that are here today. Most of them have changed. That's a constant. So the people have changed, and they're on councils, and cities, as Dan has outlined, are integral. So that's same thing in the Metro Council. The Metro Council that's there today wasn't there 10 years ago. We also have the governor, who's also changed, who's got a mandate for housing and so forth, and putting a lot of pressure on infrastructure. The cost of infrastructure has changed considerably. The dynamics around that and the loans and the impacts to families have changed. Poverty is on the rise. We're more in an austere position than ever before. So when we build infrastructure, those impacts to families and households are higher than ever because there's not enough money. We're going to see all this money and pressure towards building housing, and a greater emphasis, which has really changed, on housing more so than anything else. So I won't list them all, but I think it has changed, and we also sold off some of our land, so now we have less industrial land than we had before. So we're not really trying to market that; we're just trying to take advantage of what we do have. Clearly, even how Metro expands the urban growth boundary has changed considerably in the last 10, 12 years. It's always moving, but what has not changed is the fact that we don't have very much opportunity. We haven't had much investment in infrastructure. We haven't, period, especially in transportation. So those are the areas in which I'm frustrated. And to be an ideal candidate for a developer, you need to have those building blocks for success. And building blocks is the land, it's the infrastructure, and it's the money to be invested to make it all happen, and a willing city. So those are part of the building blocks, and I think we need to be able to keep up and bring that up to speed. Should it take a long time? No, it shouldn't take a long time for sake of taking a long time, but it does take some time to make all this stuff happen. I'm not here to dictate what the right amount of time is, but the prices have changed considerably, and the ability for a developer to build is tougher than ever before, as they tell me, and the cost and so forth. A lot of projects are on pause. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. Commissioner Shaw, you wanted to make a motion?
Sure. I move to direct staff to begin the industrial site readiness study and to prepare the Metro 2040 Planning and Development Grant application for the development-ready land study.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Scholl has directed staff to begin made a motion to direct staff to begin the industrial site readiness study and prepare the Metro 2024-2040 Planning and Development Grant application for the development-ready land study, and Commissioner Schrader has seconded the motion. Commissioners, I want to appreciate in advance your support of this. I want to appreciate staff and the work you're doing, but let Godspeed dictate your ways and don't let the bureaucrats take over and slow you down. Okay, thank you. Would the clerk please take the poll?
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Savis.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl.
Aye.
Madam Chair.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Commissioners. I think that has concluded our business for today, Commissioners. We are adjourned. We will see you tomorrow morning.